All right, first things first. Yes, this is a cat tree with a braid attached to it. Until you have been woken up at 3 in the morning by a big ass cat sitting on your head trying to yank a braid out of your scalp, you will not understand why I had to make a decision such as this. For the record, this one fell out naturally, and I decided to reduce, reuse, recycle. Okay? Okay. So that's just gonna be there for the rest of the video, and I would appreciate it if you ignored it. So today I'm doing the Black Booktuber tag. This tag was created by Reading Black, and I will put their channel in the description below. I have my phone propped up on several pillows and a book since it's cold and rainy and I want to sit on the couch, so I'm going to try not to gesticulate too much or else I will knock everything over. So the first prompt, unfortunately, is tell us about yourself, which strikes fear into my heart because it reminds me of all those awkward icebreakers at church camp and in Catholic school. But that being said, here are some things, I guess. I have been a nanny, a waitress, an archaeologist, a producer. I'm a student, a partner. I like to travel, like to read. I can be competitive and impatient and a know-it-all. I can also be curious and creative and introspective. This is what we got. Next is, who is a Black author that you love that a lot of people don't know about? And I'm going to go with Helen Oyeyemi. She's a critically acclaimed author. Her first novel, Icarus Girl, she wrote when she was 18 years old. So I don't really know if she's under the radar, but I don't see her books being reviewed that often on Booktube. Icarus Girl is about a young woman who is half British and half Nigerian who feels torn between the two cultures and ends up going back to Nigeria with her mom to spend some time there with that side of a family. And while she is in this new environment, exploring these new people, she finds this best friend, someone that gets her into some trouble, someone that shares things about her own life and her family that she didn't know, and someone that apparently nobody else can see. So it's a really beautiful, interesting, intense tale about about a girl on the cusp of two cultures, but it also starts to get dark and surreal and get into some Yoruba mythology, and it's really, really interesting, and it's so hard for me to imagine that an 18-year-old wrote it. Another book by Helen Oyeyemi that I'm really excited to read is Boy, Snow, Bird, which apparently is this creative retelling of Snow White, but with a male main character, and it also plays with this idea of having mixed heritage, being from two different cultures. So I would highly recommend Helen Oyeyemi. Next is, what is my favorite book about the Black experience? I had to pick two for this one. I couldn't just pick one, but they are very different. So the first one I will say is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I don't read a lot of YA, but when this book came out, my partner, who at the time was working at Barnes & Noble, picked it up for me immediately, and I was so glad. Why I connected with it so much, I think, besides it just being a well-written, interesting story, is that the main character Star is a Black girl who goes to a predominantly white school, and all of the microaggressions and nuances that come with that are compounded once one of her friends is unjustly killed by the police, and she's kind of thrust into this life as an activist and has to choose, how she's going to navigate these two worlds, but also what type of risk she is willing to take in order to stand up for what she believes in. It has been turned into a movie starring Amandla, which I have not seen. I actually have not seen The Hate You Give, Fruitvale Station, 12 Years a Slave. I wouldn't have watched Django Unchained if my family hadn't brought me. Not knocking the quality of these films or the impact of their importance. It's been really, really hard for me to ever really want to sit down and watch a fictionalized portrayal of just some truly awful things, but the book is really great. And the other book I'd recommend is Sula by Toni Morrison. I already talked about this one a lot in my mid-year wrap-up tag, but I will say the reason it's on this list is because it follows the main character Sula and also her friends, women that take care of her, women in her immediate family and surroundings, all who have made very different choices in life. And one of the reasons I love it is because I feel like Toni Morrison does an excellent job of showing the pros and cons of the different choices these women make to assimilate, to rebel, to bend themselves into mothers, to fit themselves into the mold as wives, to take up the mantle as, the town nuisance or, the town slut or whatever people want to call them. in order to have a sense of freedom and independence. And the ending, in my opinion, does not necessarily praise one character over another in terms of the choices they made. But I think Black womanhood in particular is such a unique experience, and that often when we're talking about the Black experience, unfortunately, that narrative can be dominated by mainly male stories. So The Hate You Give and Sula. Next, favorite book by a Black author. This is one of my favorite books. I couldn't just pick one, but I decided to go with Heart and Soul, an African American story by Kadir Nelson. This book is beautiful. It has some of the most beautiful illustrations I have ever seen. It goes all the way from the first slaves being brought to American shores, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, the Jim Crow era, the Civil Rights Movement. It's a beautiful, beautiful kind of overview of the Black experience in America and Black history overall. And again, I'll try to find some images online, because like these paintings are so lush and rich and striking, and it ends on a hopeful note, because of course, you can't fit all of Black history into one book, but really with this idea of how far we have come, how much we are capable of, how much more we have to do, what our future is going to hold. It's such a beautiful overview, and it's one of those books that I think could just be like a coffee table book that you flip through, because again, it's gorgeous, but also it's a really great reminder to just I think it really helped me connect with my history in a different way, because you learn about these individual things and you read different books about smaller moments in the history, but just to have an overview with these just striking, jarring in a good way, in their beauty and their intensity, images, it's just, I just love it. I just love it so much. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. It's a great overview. Excuse me. Of course, there's a lot they had to leave out because the book is only like this big, but I would highly recommend it to everyone. Next prompt was recommend a Black and queer book. And for this, I'm going to recommend a book I actually haven't finished yet, but I am enjoying so far, which is Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde. Now, Audre Lorde is an iconic writer, was an iconic writer, woman, mother, lesbian, warrior poet, as she says. Some of her most famous quotes are, "I am deliberate and afraid of nothing. You cannot dismantle the master tools and you cannot dismantle the master's house with the master's tools." And I had read snippets of her work. I had seen these quotes, I'd seen these black and white photos, of her at the chalkboard and just the intensity and the intelligence radiating from her. But I had never sat down and just read her essays or read a collection of her speeches, which is what Sister Outsider is. The version I got was the Penguins Classic version, which is this beautiful burgundy cover with shiny gold overlay. So I'll try to find a picture of that version to put up. But I am really, really enjoying it so far. Something that this prompt made me realize, though, was that most of my books are nonfiction, but still, I don't have any books that center Black queer characters. And when I think center Black queer characters, I think fiction. So among the few fiction I have, that's what I'm referring to. And I think that's because I don't really read romance. And most of the recommendations I've seen on the other Black Booktuber tags, when it comes to this prompt, it's a romantic book. It's a book about a relationship. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, I mentioned in my mid-year tag that I actually really enjoy the romantic relationship in Dominicana. But in general, that's not what I gravitate towards. So I'm looking forward to being more intentional about what books I buy next and trying to find stories that, hey, maybe I'll try some more romance, why not? But if I'm still not really in the mood for that, trying to find stories that center these characters, but the main plot is not about them having a relationship, if that makes sense. For the next prompt, it is recommend a book with a Black person on the cover. And for this, I have to go with The Autobiography of Malcolm X by Alex Haley. This book really opened my eyes to a segment of civil rights leaders, of Black activists, of people fighting for Black liberation and fighting for equality that I feel is very often left out of history books. Unfortunately, Malcolm X, I think, is one of the most misunderstood figures in the civil rights movement. And part of that has to do with an education system, an American education system that heavily, heavily narrows who we even learn about in school and narrows it down to like 3 or 4 people, but also is only interested in talking about people who preach nonviolence. And that's not what I'm trying to boil down all their ideology to, but for me, I think that's the main reason why people like Stokely Carmichael and Malcolm X and Assata Shakur really do not get the same amount of time dedicated to their speeches, their philosophies, their ideals. What I loved about this book was you could really see the way his philosophies changed throughout his life, from breaking with the Nation of Islam, from when he made his holy journey to Mecca, and how that changed the way he looked at the Black struggle in America, times in his life where, he was out there in these streets, getting selling drugs, doing his thing, and what it meant for him to go from a person who was mainly focused about himself and his money and his situation to a larger global struggle, but also a larger American struggle of the Black movement. And I just think that there are so many stereotypes, I feel, around people like Malcolm X and Assata Shakur and Stokely Carmichael. And whether or not as an individual I agree with all of their ideologies, which I don't, they played a crucial role in the movement. The entire movement for equality and dignity and humanity for Black people cannot be boiled down simply to Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. And so I would really highly recommend this book, especially if you're someone who has perhaps a very one-dimensional stock character version of a person in your head when you hear the word Black liberation, or when you hear about anybody who didn't sit firmly in the camp of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference or things like that. Next, we have recommend a book by a Black author that makes you happy, and that's going to be Her Stories by Virginia Hamilton. Again, I talked about this in another video. I think it was my favorite Black children's books, but one of the reasons I love this book so much and it brings me so much joy is it is a collection of stories of African American fables and folk tales of, talking animals and fairies and just real people, men and women trying to figure out their lives. I love it so much because it pulls from different parts of Black American culture, whether it's, like the Gullah region, whether it's the Midwest. And in the very back of the book, there are real stories of Black women who survived the Great Surrender, aka, the Emancipation Proclamation, who were born slaves but lived long enough to see freedom, who lived such rich, full, beautiful lives. And the mixing of these, stories passed down from generation to generation, and getting to read a little bit of a biography of a couple women who, one, passed down these stories themselves, but also got to see the world change in ways that you couldn't even imagine. Flipping through it brings me so much joy. The illustrations are beautiful. I feel like there's a lot of good representation, again, from different regions of the United States when it comes to Black stories. And I think it's also a pretty good mix when it comes to stories that are a little more scary, like vampire women and boo hags, and stories that are simply fun and clever and witty. Next, for the prompt, we have, recommend some Black booktubers. So the first Black booktuber I want to recommend is Julesy. And I put her on this list first because I remember watching a video in which she said she felt she wasn't really a part of the Black booktube community because she does a lot of other types of content. I mean, she has a Smart Brown book club. She'll do wrap-ups at the end of the year. She'll do reviews on books. But she also does videos with different politicians talking about, defunding the police and accessible healthcare. She'll take pop culture topics, things like memes, and connect it to the way that Breonna Taylor has been turned into a meme, and break down why that is problematic. She'll talk about, racism on TikTok. She has a wide variety of topics. And again, while I don't always agree with the way she comes at them, I find it interesting to hear her perspective. And I do genuinely enjoy her book reviews because I find that we often read a lot of the same books, or books that are kind of in the same vein. Another Black booktuber I really like is The Artisan Geek. This is one of those people that, even though we don't read a lot of the same books, I still enjoy her videos because I love her soothing voice. I love her energy. She seems like she is being very authentic and unique and not trying to fit into this I almost said cookie cutter. That's not nice. It seems like she's not trying to be anything other than herself. And it seems like she's not trying to fit into a model that was created, I'm going to assume unintentionally, but seems to be reinforced by some booktubers on this platform. And I also want to talk about someone I just subscribed to, I think like a week ago, was Books by Leanis. I'll put her name up on the screen in case I'm mispronouncing it. But I've really liked some of her videos on consumerism, on book hauls, on what she's learned from being on YouTube for a couple years. I believe she is Black German. I'll confirm that. And I thought it was really, really interesting the way she has individual videos breaking down Black authors like Zora Neale Hurston and James Baldwin and Audre Lorde. And so I've been really enjoying her content as well. I really like the way her brain works. And finally, we have what are some upcoming Black author books you're interested in reading in 2020. And unfortunately, I have nothing to share. I don't really keep up on new releases. And so I'm trying to think of of the Black books I have been reading recently, if I have, I don't know. I mean, of the Black books I've been reading recently, Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, Audre Lorde, Cornel West, Eddie S. Glaude, I have not several of those people are dead, but I have not been like, oh great, what else are they coming out with? I know, let's do this one. I know Eddie S. Glaude has a new book coming out about James Baldwin that I do want to read. Okay, sorry, it took me a minute, but we got there. I don't remember the title of it. It was something I saw in Barnes & Noble, and I was like, oh, he's coming out with a new book. And I am a huge James Baldwin fan. So I'll put that book up here with the title and all that as well. But in general, y'all, I know nothing about new releases. That is not my forte. Like, all the books that I have on my shelf that I want to read are older in general. And yeah, so I mean, I guess it's a good prompt though, because it makes me stay connected with what's going on. Finally, was tag some booktubers in the description. So put everybody that I mentioned there, but also a couple other people I've been watching and enjoying, like Mayana Reads and Tiana T. The only reason I didn't put them in that earlier prompt is I wanted to do the 3 people I've been watching the most often recently, but that's not to say that they're the only 3 Black booktubers that I like. So that was my little tag. I feel like I was kind of all over the place, and I'm very hungry right now, so I'm gonna go. But I hope that if it's raining where you are, you can cuddle up on a couch with your H&M scarf and your synthetic braid cat toy. And I hope you have a good day. Okay, bye.